Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Elevate Review Panel for Individual and Creative Businesses, Day 8. My name is Jesus Pantel. I am the Cultural Funding Supervisor for the City of Boston Economic Development Department Cultural Arts Division. With me is Jasmine Patel. She is our outside equity facilitator, making sure that both city staff as well as our review panelists keep equity top of mind when we are reviewing these applications. The panelists have reviewed all applications prior to today and have provided tentative scores and comments. They will be finalizing their scores today. They may or may not change their scores depending on the feedback they hear from their fellow panelists. They're not required to do so, but they may if they like. The panelists are not scoring on consensus. They were brought on board for their various areas of expertise. So if they do have differing viewpoints, that's fine. We want them to give their feedback and insight on each application. We've asked the panelists to look beyond grantsmanship to the extent possible. So if they, are either familiar with your work or they went to your website or social media to find out some information, they can use that in scoring your applications. We will be timing the applications for our English applications. They will have a 10-minute maximum time limit. For our Spanish applications, they will have a 20-minute time limit. There will be a slight change in schedule. We do not yet have our Spanish interpreter, so we will be moving the Spanish language applications till after lunch, so at 1 o'clock. So our applications this morning will have a maximum review time of 10 minutes. And then regardless for the Spanish and English, if we get down to a 2-minute warning, I will let the panelists know 1-minute warning, 30-second warning, and then counting down from 10 seconds if need be. We average about 5 minutes per application in English. Today will be our first day doing Spanish applications. So we expect, probably 8 to 10 minutes, but we'll see what the average is for those applications. But again, for Spanish, maximum of 20 minutes. We will pause the timer if there are any technical difficulties, someone's internet is going out, anything like that. And I think that is all that we have for the applications or, any information that you all need to know regarding how the process will work today. So we will move on to reviewing our first application, which is Kayla Martinez-Leshley. John and Florin are our primary and secondary. And John, I will start the timer whenever you are ready to begin giving your commentary.
Ready whenever you are.
Go for
it. Good morning, everyone. This is for the review of Kayla Martinez-Leshley, and see, looking at my notes, she's applying for a $30,000 grant, and this is for a series of it's fashion art exhibitions, but more specifically, it's the sustainable fashion arts. To raise awareness for the environmental impact. So one of them is made specifically from recycled, or I guess what some of the information online is referring to upcycled materials. And it's pretty clearly laid out to promote as in the tourism, for visiting Austin. Let's see. The budget covers what it's clearly laid out, all the information. Let me see, on one of them, the history of service. She's been in Austin for 30 some years, doing some good work in the community. Let's see, one of them, cultural leadership speaks for itself. Her work does. Some of the providing accessibility, even down to the seating arrangements and everything is clearly laid out. A really well-written proposal. Language accessibility, including Braille, multilingual options. The activities, it's mainly hosted, currently hosted at one gallery, but the proposal is for multiple locations and events. And like I said, accessibility and language is clearly outlined. The marketing is there. There's my notes I have here clearly demonstrates accessibility. Is clearly intersectionality and inclusion is clearly outlined. Cultural activities, the same. Language, cultural leadership, like I said, her work speaks for itself. Over 30 years in Austin, and her history of service. Key constituencies, those are addressed, and that's about all I got.
Thank you. Secondary, Corinne?
Okay, so yeah, I'm gonna start off with marketing. Looks great. Marketing plan for this event is already in place. Plan on stretching marketing dollars to do more this year, so that's great. Budget notes, I would like to add that I need more detail on line items, deeper line items broken down. Are you going to split the artist funds and admin support and extra, etc.? So basically what I'm saying, are you going to split up the artist funds and the admin support funds in the budget? That's one thing that I'd like to add on. But my overall view of the application here is great. It was great. Searching for a little bit more substance, a little continuous in the intersectional and marketing areas, but the programs and classes for the Hispanic Heritage event, they are meaningful. I have an understanding of that, and understand that your individual creative space of business also. But the impact looks good, especially desired impact to celebrate and preserve Latino culture, provide a platform for local artists, and strengthen community ties. So that right there was something that I highlighted in my application. And so that'll be my add-ons for this
one. My note on the budget was, I don't know if it was intended to partially fund the event or to fund it in completion. That's the only part where I was unsure about, where the overall budget, the grant doesn't match the budget, so I'm not too clear on how that was to work. And it maybe perhaps explaining that a little bit further might help understand that, if it's meant to partially fund it in its entirety, or how that's supposed to work.
Thank you. I will say, in the budget, I see that staff has only done a cursory glance, but we're following along as the panelists are giving their commentary. The budget does add up to more than $30,000, which is fine. We have optional application workshops where we tell applicants, which is maybe not necessarily John's comment, but just noting that since it is over the 30,000, we do encourage them to, even though there is no matching requirement, if they do have additional funds, to include those, preferably in column C instead of in column B. But again, we're asking the panel to look beyond grantsmanship so that the information is there. But I think John's comment still stands about is it the full, or not? And so just a little bit of clarity on that would have helped him on that application. With that being said, since I have the mic, Lexi, was there anything you would like to add on this application?
Sure. I'll add just a couple of the notes I had that I don't think have been touched on. I guess since we're speaking about budget, one thing that I noted is they did obviously have some answers in the accessibility accommodations section, but I didn't see a line item for that in their budget, so I was just flagging that. Yeah, I think that the activities are sort of focused on centering the Latinx community and women in the arts. So I do see, as other people have said, strong alignment with sort of the city's key priorities. I had one other note. Let me find it. Oh yeah, for cultural leadership, I think that, the applicant's lived experience is pretty clear. I just think it also would have been great to hear how other team members sort of represent the lived experience of their key constituencies, just to see how those other voices involved sort of reflect their audience.
Great, thank you. We have just over a minute left on this application. Any additional thoughts or comments on this application? No? Seeing as there are none, if you would please finalize your scores and let me know when you have done so. And while the panelists are finalizing their scores, we do have a fourth panelist who is not able to make it in the morning, but will be here after lunch. And so a copy of the recording will be sent to him so he can change his scores if he would like. And panel, whenever you're done, if you can just raise your hand so that way I know. Lexi? I need to stop saying because then it sounds like Alexi. So Lexi, yes, I see that you have finalized your score. And John and Corinne, do y'all need more time? I just didn't know if you'd raise your hand and I hadn't seen it yet. Corinne, okay, I see out of the corner there, you raised your hand. So you're good on your score. And John, okay, great. Thanks, y'all. Our next application up for review is Black Life ATX Community Arts and Fun Fest. John and Lexi are our primary and secondary. And John, whenever you are ready to begin.
Ready whenever you are. So Black Life ATX Community Arts. It's a multifaceted approach to an event. Let's see, they are applying for $30,000 grant, and it covers a range of different activities. So this is it seems to have it's really well, it's lined out really well. It has not only music and dance, but theater, community reach events, like arts, just fun things like doormat decorating, gardening, also storytelling, which obviously is going to tie into Austin's heritage and culture and propelling that forward. The key constituencies are clearly outlined by the event, and the reach, the history of service also speaks for itself. Let's see, cultural leadership, that's also clearly outlined. The activities, the same. Intersectionality is outlined. Accessibility is well documented for as far as accessibility, the language, the translation, ADA access, clearly outlined. Languages, I think I said it already, but language accessibility. The marketing is outlined well. I think perhaps some more specific details would pretty much put it over the top. The budget is clearly outlined, and it seems to be an event with quite a bit of reach. Like I said, it includes all kinds of different activities like capoeira, golfing, painting, arts, crafts, gardening. So really well laid out application, and that's my input on it.
Great, thank you. Secondary, Lexi?
Yeah, agree with a lot of what it organization centering Austin's Black community has been sort of central to their mission from the get-go. So I think that was reflected in their their activities, their key constituencies, history of service. With cultural leadership, I think decision-making is done through a pretty collaborative process, including, their advisory board and community conversation. So that was good to see. I did want like a few more details as far as like who do those groups consist of, like who is on their board, how does it reflect their community, that sort of thing. But yeah, gave a lot of detail and sort of alignment as far as the actual activities, the sort of Arts and Fun Fest event, aligning with the city's key constituencies. What else? Yeah, they had a range of accommodations listed. I think in language accessibility, there is a plan to include bilingual staff and volunteers, but I wanted to hear like what languages that would actually entail. So I think just a little bit more detail there could have been helpful. But yeah, they have a very clear marketing plan for reaching both existing and new communities, tourists, all of those. Their budget included, payments to artists, all the sort of other things that we are looking for from an equity perspective. I also wrote a note to myself that I think the slide deck they included at the end with examples of previous events were also just like super helpful for contextualizing it. But yeah, that's everything I had.
Thank you, Lexi. Do any other panelists have anything to add? I know, Claren, if you wanted to add anything related to this application.
This is I believe this is, I don't, this the Gutierrez, Austin, right?
This is the Black Black Life ATX Community Arts and Fun Fest.
Okay.
And while Corinne's looking to see if he has any notes, we have advised our panelists not to repeat anything that has been stated by other panelists. If they do have differing opinions, or even if it's similar thoughts but a different note, we ask that they provide.
Oh, no. Well, I don't have any notes right now. So thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you. And then for the recording, or if the applicant is watching live, we do have a fourth review panelist who could not be here this morning. Will be here after lunch, and we will send a copy of the recording to him if he would like to change his scores. Panelists are not required to change their scores. Any additional comments on this application? If there are no further comments, if you would please finalize your scores and let me know when you've done so. Lexi? Florin, I think I saw a thumbs up, and John, I definitely see one. Okay,
Yes, sir.
yes. Excellent. We will move on to our next application then. Our next application up for review is Fancy Styles. Lexi and John are our primary and secondary, and Lexi, whenever you're ready to begin.
Yeah, so this is Fancy Styles requesting $30,000 for a series of workshops, community events, and partnerships. One thing I really liked about this application was just the focus that they had on safe and inclusive spaces for people to explore emotions and foster a sense of community, all sort of through music. I did write a note to myself that I think there were a lot of potential activities listed in the grant, but I was a little bit confused about just sort of like the details of what they were requesting funding for. So just sort of a comment throughout was that a little bit more detail or specificity I think would have helped. But yeah, they do a lot of work with the community through music. I do think through, as far as key constituencies and history of service, it looks like their work sort of serves the community at large and isn't necessarily centering any of the city's sort of priority key constituencies there. Let's see. I do think in intersectionality, it addresses ways to be intersectional and sort of talks about intersectionality in a broad sense. But I think showing how that, ties up in their organization or their proposed activities was something that I was looking for. But yeah, they do name some of their accessible accommodations, some of the language accessibility. I think in their marketing plan, some of the funds would be going towards outreach, workshops, educational activities, but again, just sort of lacking some specifics on like what methods they would use and who they would reach out to. But yeah, I think those are sort of my general notes about the application.
Thank you. Secondary, John?
The proposal mentions art and music, and it's well written and delivered in a it's well delivered, but it doesn't specify what type of art or music or activities. So that would have been helpful in getting an idea of what the event would actually look like, as far as the same. I think the same would apply to networking and collaboration, presentation. Other than that, that's my only thought on it. Everything else is clear.
All right, thank you, panelists. Are there additional thoughts to share? All right, thank you.
Thanks, everyone. If there are no additional comments, we ask panelists not to repeat anything that has been stated by other panelists. And we do have a fourth panelist who will be here after lunch. They will view a copy of the recording to see if they have any scores that they want to change based on the feedback provided by their fellow panelists. Not required to do so, but they will have that option. If there are no further comments on this application, seeing as there, oh yes, Corinne, go ahead.
Oh no, I was just seeing if you were doing the final score.
Yes, okay, so Corinne's score is finalized. Everybody else, just let me know. You can raise your hand when your score is finalized. Lexi? And while John is finalizing his score, the 10-minute time limit only applies to reviewing the applications. The panelists can change, and John is finalized with the score. We stop the 10 minutes when they're recording. They finalize their scores when the applicant, we're not recording, when they're done reviewing. We stop the timer once they have done that and they finalize their scores before we move on to the next application, which is Wheelhouse Ceramics. Corinne and Lexi are our primary and secondary. And Corinne, whenever you're ready to begin. Oh, and you're muted. And so the timer will start when you're unmuted and giving your commentary.
You said, let me see which one this is. Which one is this for? So I can follow my notes.
Wheelhouse Ceramics. And again, the timer won't start until Corinne starts giving his notes. We want the full 10 minutes allocated. There were about 26 or so applications the panelists have reviewed. We do have a fourth panelist who is not available until after lunch, so a copy of the recording will be provided to him so he can change his scores if he'd like. Panelists are not required to change their scores.
This is let's see. Okay, so what I have here is there's my overall view. There's a strong mission and goals. We're looking for more detail, focused language. The ADA language accessibility sections There's great cultural leadership and activities in the budget that supports the narrative also. But there's nothing in the mission, none for the history, the leadership. I have no notes for that. The activities. Yeah, we don't have any budget notes or marketing notes.
Thank you. If there are no further comments from Corinne. Secondary, Lexi?
Yeah, so yeah, Wheelhouse Ceramics is requesting funding specifically for like opening a teaching focused ceramic studio. And one thing I really appreciated in the application was just like their focus on dedication to teaching and community support. I thought that their mission sort of sought to like broadly serve the community, so it's not necessarily centering the any of the city's like priority key constituencies. But I do think, like we saw in the intersectionality and inclusion section, like they said that they would hold events specific to the intersecting identities that each of their teaching artists embodies, and they have sort of a diverse team. So I do think we see that show up there. I actually scored them pretty highly on accessibility and language accessibility. I think that they had just some accommodations. I think, beyond the basic ADA accommodations, also just thinking of like one example, consultations for at-home setup, and just thinking about accessibility through a few different lenses. And so I thought that that was super interesting. Let's see. I think in their marketing plan, they had a pretty clear plan for reaching both existing and new community members. I wanted a few more details just on how they planned to reach tourists. So I think that having some more information on that would have been really helpful. And then their budget is super detailed, focuses on the need for setting up the classroom space. I think that was sort of the biggest expense. But one thing that I flagged is that it doesn't include payments to artists or admin, which is, I know, it's something that we were looking for. So I just flagged that in my notes.
Thank you. Thanks, Lexi. Do any additional panelists have comments? John, not sure if you'd like to share your thoughts.
It's laid out really well. And I think that it, being involved with the schools and the youth is always a good thing when it comes to the arts and music. But other than that, I think it's pretty much been covered.
Great, thank you.
Thanks, everyone. I will say, as a point of clarity, more for the applicant, but just so the panelists know, if the application does score high enough to receive funding, this is in regards to the comment about reaching tourists in the marketing plan. That is something that is specifically laid out in the marketing plan, so that's why that, or in the question, which is why that comment was made. But just so the panelists are aware, and so the applicant is aware as well, since our source of funding comes from the hotel occupancy tax, we do require all of our applicants who receive funding to post their event to Visit Austin, which is a website of the Austin Convention and Visitors Bureau, so that way they can, and that does reach tourists. So that way we're compliant with the hotel occupancy tax statute, but it's still a good comment, as we do ask in the marketing plan. One of the things that you should address is how you reach tourists. So with that clarification provided, any additional comments on this application?
I'd just like to say I still scored it very fairly.
What was that? You'd like to?
I still scored it fairly high.
Oh, still scored it fairly high.
Yeah, I still did, just to let them know.
Yes, thank you. And again, panelists are not required to change their scores, but they can depending on the feedback that they hear from their fellow panelists. And changing scores means going up or going down, or you can keep your score the same. If there are no further comments on this application, if there are none, if you would please finalize your scores and let me know when you have done so. Corinne? Lexi? Corinne and John. All right, thanks, y'all. Next application up for review is Black Austin Tours. Corinne and Lexi are our primary and secondary. And Corinne, whenever you're ready to begin. Oh, and you're muted. Oh, you're muted, Corinne. If you're trying to give your commentary, we'll start the timer when you're unmuted and speaking. And while Corinne maybe is pulling up his notes for this application, I will note that we do have a fourth panelist who is not available until after lunchtime. So the a copy of the recording will be made available to him so he can change his scores if he would like. Again, not required to do so.
This is Kadako Productions.
This is Black Austin Tours. And we have gone slightly out of order today. So that's why there may be some confusion on where we're going. We try to go in the order that we have listed, but we did have to change the order a little bit around today. Again, the 10-minute timer will not start until the primary starts giving
Alexi, you want to start off with this one if you don't mind? I can find my notes.
Yeah, that'll be fine. Thank you, Lexi. And Lexi, whenever you're ready to begin.
Okay. Yes, so this is Black Austin Tours. They are requesting $30,000 for a mural project and pop-up art gallery inside of Ideal Barbershop, which is one of, if not the oldest Black-owned barbershop in Austin. Let's see. I scored them pretty highly in their key constituencies and history of service. I think that their mission has centered, oh, sorry, I am looking. Oh, no, I was in the right place. Okay. Sorry, but yes, I think that their mission has centered Black-owned businesses and Black families from the start. And so that commitment to equity has been pretty clear. Let's see. I think as far as cultural leadership, the applicant is the primary decision maker and has lived experience in the community, but there's also a pretty diverse advisory board, and they seek to hear from Black artists and community members. So I thought that that was great and sort of pretty aligned with what the grant is looking for. I also wrote a note that with the bullet format, I think the information was very clear and sort of hit on all the things that we were looking for. Yeah, I gave them pretty high scores all around. I think one thing that I flagged on marketing just is that I don't see evidence of any strategies for reaching audience members with disabilities or whose primary language isn't English, which is just one of the things that we ask about. So I flagged that. But yeah, I think their application was really clear, clear commitment to equity through their project. And yeah, I think that's everything.
Great, thank you. Secondary, Corinne.
Yes, I don't have any notes on them at the moment. So we can just go with what Lexi said, but I'm not disputing anything. I don't have anything now.
So not as many notes on this one. I think that's what I heard you say. So
Yeah, I don't have anything else.
so overall, it seems like it's a higher scoring application for you
Yeah.
then, is that correct?
It's a higher score application.
Yes, thank you.
Thank
And we have advised our panelists, to comment on all the applications, and especially if they are lower scoring applications, their rationale for why they're maybe not giving as high a score. If it's a higher score, they may not have as many notes. Since I have the mic, I will ask John if he has any comments that he would like to add in.
No, I think it's been covered.
Great, thank you. If there are no further thoughts or comments on this application, seeing as there are none, if you would please finalize your scores. Gloria, I see you finalized yours. Lexi? And while John is finalizing his scores, just clarification that the 10-minute timer is only for reviewing the applications, and John is completed. Alrighty, thank you, everyone. We will move on to our next application, which is Murals by Becca. John and Lexi are our primary and secondary. And John, whenever you're ready to begin.
Bear with me 1 second. I'm working on a loaner laptop. Mine died.
Oh no.
Just trying to navigate it, but I have everything here. So Murals by Becca is has applied for a $30,000 grant. Let me see some of the review. I'm seeing, well, the way it added up, it wasn't as high of a score. I think that was mainly based on, well, one example would be like the specifics. So the grant is for hiring young, less established mural artists in Austin. Obviously, murals would be are a big source of. Everybody sees murals. You know, the murals are the cities are famous for their murals. It's a great idea, and the cities need artists. And so it says, includes diverse backgrounds, but it doesn't specifically say who the artists would be. And then maybe perhaps some examples of the work would help get a visual idea of the theme of the mural. I know they're all probably all artists are different, but it would give a visual. It would help understand the key constituencies. It's just clearly outlined. History of service is also there. Cultural leadership, that kind of ties into what type of murals are we, art or artists are we talking about. It might help understand that a little bit better, a little bit more detail. The cultural activities, that's clearly outlined. Intersectionality, I think it ties in well with the idea. Accessibility is mentioned, but not very clearly. I put quite a bit of thought into this, and I got to thinking, well, these murals, they're all over the place and in different locations, and so at first thought that might not seem something that's relatable, but it kind of is. It's where are the murals going to be, and the budget, marketing is outlined, budget outlined as well. They both could have used a little bit more detail once again to kind of help get an idea, understand exactly how it all comes together. And those are my notes on this one.
Great, thank you. Secondary, Lexi?
Yeah, I echo a lot of what John has said. I think the sort of mission and activities is really focused on involving the local art community, especially young and new artists, which is great to see.
Yeah.
I don't think there's any sort of specifics though about the key constituencies and how equity is maybe a consideration there. So I guess just echoing that thought. Yeah, I think on accessibility, I was wanting sort of some accommodations listed on top of like just being in a public space. So thinking a little bit more, having more detail there. I think they sort of outlined their marketing plan and listed a few examples. I do think it was primarily focused on social media. And so I think that just more detail about like how they would bring in new constituencies. It was just a little bit less clear around how they would reach different audience members. But yeah, those are all the notes I had there.
Great, thank you. Are there any other comments from other panelists? All right, we're good.
If there are no further comments from the panel, we do have a fourth panelist who is not available this morning. Will be joining us after lunch. A copy of the recording will be sent to them so they can change their scores if they'd like. They're not required to do so. But if there are any other comments on this application, anything that has been stated or that has not been stated that you had a note of, differing opinion? If there are no further comments on this application, please finalize your scores and let me know when you have done so. Corinne, Lexi? John, are you done with your scores?
I think he said he was. I don't.
Yep.
Okay, sorry, I didn't see that. All righty, thanks everyone. We will pause.
Recording in progress.
And we are back from break. Our next application up for review is Pam Reyes. John and Corinne are our primary and secondary. And John, let me get my timer ready. And then whenever you are ready to begin, I'm ready whenever you are. Oh, and you're muted, so the timer will start when you are unmuted and giving your commentary.
Think I got it. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, I think let's see, Pam Reyes has applied for a $30,000 grant, and this is for a music recording venture and release. All this is really it's laid out really well as far as the details and the strategy for recording, production, release, the locations. Everything is covered really well. Let me see. So key constituents is outlined. History, there's a history of service, but the question I had was perhaps a little bit more clarification on as it relates to Austin. There is history documented there. Cultural leadership. This is another one where perhaps a little bit more clarification with specifics would have helped get an idea of cultural activities are outlined. Intersectionality is baked into the event. It's inherent to the event, if you will. Accessibility is covered. Language accessibility is also, it's a multilingual venture. Marketing is covered down to is very well detailed, and the budget seems to reflect that. The only suggestion I would maybe give or would help seeing is the individual contributors. It's outlined, but it could have been clarified a little bit better exactly who the people would be. And as far as the overall vision, it looks like a really well outlined release strategy. Looking at the only question I had would be specifics in the budget of as far as all the, let's see how to put this, how all the individual contributors, that could have been outlined a little bit better in that section, and like maybe a subsection, like a breakdown part of that. And other than that, that's all I got.
Thank you. Secondary, Corinne?
Okay. over the overall, the grant started out strong, gradually got broader. I was hoping to hear more details on leadership. But the overall view for me is that they did good, and just looking for more details. That's all.
All right, thank you. Are there any additional comments from panelists?
Yeah, and I gave this application pretty high scores kind of across the board. I mean, I think that the commitment to equity and just sort of like telling diverse stories is pretty clear, and like from the content of the music to who she chooses to collaborate with to how she promotes herself. I think for me on the cultural leadership response, I gave a pretty high scoring there. I think that the artist herself demonstrates lived experience with a few different key constituencies that she's trying to reach. But I think she also intentionally seeks out collaborations with local Austin artists who identify as women, non-binary, queer, Black, Asian, and diasporic people of color. And that's sort of detailed in her answer to the fourth question. So I gave pretty high scores there. There's a clear plan for the project, a plan to equitably compensate artists. So I think that equity was definitely just very central, as well as intersectionality from who they're collaborating with down to the timing, with the release sort of slated to be at the end of Asian Pacific Islander Heritage Month and leading into Pride Month. So I thought that it was like a really thoughtful and detailed application. I think the only thing I flagged was within the marketing plan, the sort of note that I didn't necessarily see specifics on how they plan to reach tourists within the plan, but otherwise I gave pretty high marks all around.
Great, thank you, Lexi. All right, if there are no additional comments.
Well, panelists are thinking if they have any additional comments they'd like to add. Just for clarity, we do ask about tourism in the marketing plan, so that's why that comment was made. But since we do receive our funding from hotel occupancy tax funds, one of the things that we do is if an applicant is awarded funding, they are required to post their event on Visit Austin, which is a website through the Austin Convention Visitors Bureau that does reach tourists. But again, the marketing answer should specifically respond to how they intend to reach tourists. With that clarification, any additional comments or thoughts on this application? Seeing as there are none, if you would please finalize your scores and let me know when you have done so. Corinne? Lexi?
Good here.
Okay, great. Thank you, John. Next application up for review is Wapango Sin Fronteras. John and Lexi are our primary and secondary. And John, whenever you are ready to begin.
So this application is Wapango Sin Fronteras. It's they are requesting, it's for a $30,000 grant, and this one is a combination of music, dance, cultural event. So one of the things that kind of stood out for me is that it's a tourist destination event, and the way that the Wapango culture is somewhat underrepresented. Not somewhat, it is underrepresented here and abroad. So people will through some research and talking to some people, I found that it's like a destination event for Austin, meaning there's other Wapango groups throughout the country and Mexico that have and would attend the event. And through the event, it will the workshops, dance at the MAC, the Mexican American Cultural Center, Texas Folk Life, would carry on that that specific culture. The other thing is one of the organizers it also has like an art facet to it. The Huichol, the indigenous representation is there. Same thing applies, everything I said previously. So it could be, I think it could use some details would help get a visual, but as far as the marketing, reaching the target audience, Univision, Telemundo, all they list all the local Hispanic radio stations. It's seems to be well thought out. It seems to be something they've done before and well thought out. The key constituencies is there. There's a history of service, cultural leadership, intersectionality. Let's see. Accessibility could it's mentioned, but there's the clear path for it would help. There's language translation. Marketing is covered. The budget mentions most of the key points, and other than those addressing those things I mentioned, to get a clear idea of what the event would look like, it seems to be a well put together proposal and concept. That's all I got.
Thank you. Secondary, Lexi?
Yeah, echo a lot of what John says. I think that, you know, the work centers Wapango music and dance. I think that their response to the cultural activity section and some of their supplementary materials that they submitted gave me a pretty clear sense of what the event would look like. I think clear commitment to equity, also definitely an intersectional lens. The intersection of migrant, Latinx, and working class identities, and just, bringing in artists from different backgrounds to express themselves in this event. So I gave pretty high scores in key constituencies, cultural leadership, cultural activities. Let's see if there's anything for me to add. Yeah, no, I think that's it for me.
Great, thank you, panelists. Are there any additional comments related to this application? All right, thank you.
We do have a fourth panelist who is not available in the morning, but will be available after lunch. We will provide a copy of the recording if you would like to change his scores, not required to do so, but that is an option. If there are no further comments or thoughts on this application, seeing as there are none, if you would please finalize your scores and let me know when you've done so. Corinne? Lexi? And John. Great, thanks everyone. Our next application up for review is Austin Children's Theater. Lexi and Corinne are our primary and secondary, and Lexi, whenever you're ready to begin.
Yes, so this is Austin Children's Theater, and they're requesting $30,000 for their summer camps and locations around Austin, as well as the creation and rehearsal symposium series, which is retreats that they have focusing on developing new works. And I thought it was interesting. They talked about having a traveling show model. So that touches on accessibility a little bit. And I also liked that the application was very focused on youth voice and artistic expression. For key constituencies in history of service, I did give lower scores just because it looks like their mission is sort of like broadly serving youth and children. So it's not necessarily centering any of the city's sort of priority key constituencies. I did give high points on cultural leadership, though, as far as who is involved in leadership and decision making. Let's see. I did think that on intersectionality and inclusion, there's some examples of previous artist collaborations which are helpful, but I do think that just having more details and information on how voices are involved in the process would have been super helpful. I gave pretty high score for accessibility as far as the various accommodations that they are proposing. I did note that within language accessibility, some of the services are only available upon request. So just flagged that as not being quite as accessible as it could be. But yeah, I think that is everything. I think sort of clear plan and details on what they would be implementing through their various workshops and serving youth, but just noting that it is centering equity a little bit less in the application.
Thank you. Secondary, Corinne?
Like to say, I'm just gonna add, kudos, for bringing this unique experience to Austin. I like that. I think this grant is heading in the right direction. My advice is just get more organized with ideas and more intentional and specific and focused and clarified in your mission, vision, activities, and measurable goals and outcomes. That's my advice.
All right. Are there additional comments from panelists? All right, thank you.
Well, we're waiting to see if any additional thoughts come up. We do have a fourth panelist who is not available in the morning. Will be available after lunch, so we will make a copy of the recording available. He can change his scores if he would like, not required to do so. With that being said, are there any additional comments that haven't been stated that you would like to add on this application? And again, we ask applicants not to repeat anything that has been stated already by another panelist. So if there are no new additional comments on this application, if you would please finalize your scores and let me know when you have done so. Lexi? And Corinne, you're moving in and out of the camera, so I can't tell if you've given a thumbs up or a hand raise or not. And John is good. And Corinne, it looks like you're more back in focus. So you're good. Okay, great. Awesome. We'll move on to the next application then, which is Reggie Rapp's room. Corinne and Lexi are our primary and secondary. And Corinne, whenever you're ready to begin. Oh, you're muted. Sure. And while we're waiting for Corinne to pull up his notes on this one, I will say we have a fourth panelist who is not available in the morning session, will be available after lunch. So we will make a copy of this recording available to him so he can change his scores if he would like to. Panelists are not required to change their scores, but they can depending on the feedback they hear from their fellow panelists. There's a 10-minute maximum time limit for each application, but that time will not start until the primary reviewer starts giving their comments.
One second, sorry about that, guys.
No problem. Again, the timer will start once the primary starts giving their commentary. Panelists have reviewed about 26 or so applications for today, have reviewed them prior to today, so have notes and comments and tentative scores. Want to make sure we are going slightly out of order as well. We rearranged the schedule. But again, the 10-minute time will start when the primary starts giving their commentary.
Let's see, these laws starting off, this one, I'm having trouble pulling up my notes sometimes.
Okay, so we'll have the secondary will go first while Corinne is pulling up his notes. So that is Lexi, Jasmine. Just want to make sure that you're here before we get started. Alrighty, great. And Lexi, whenever you're ready to begin.
Yes. So this is Reggie Rapp's room, requesting $30,000 for their community care celebration, which is a sort of year-round event series focusing on mental health and wellness and community well-being through the arts. Let's see. Yeah, I mean, what I liked about this application was one, how clear the responses were, but also just the explicit focus on mental health and resilience for marginalized communities. I think that sort of shows up throughout all of the responses. I gave pretty high marks sort of across the board, so I didn't have a ton of comments on this. I think that equity is pretty clear in their commitment to serving some of the city's sort of priority key constituencies shows up in their history of service, their key constituencies, their cultural leadership. I think that both the founder, the leadership, and their board consists of people from, BIPOC and LGBTQ backgrounds that reflect the communities that they're serving. So there's also a lot of detail just around intersectionality within their work and their mission. Lots of accommodations listed, options for having their materials in a few different languages and a pretty clear plan for language accessibility. But yeah, I didn't have a ton of notes on this one because I scored them pretty highly.
Thank you, Lexi. Clorin's our secondary, but was pulling up his notes for this one. Clorin, whenever you're ready to begin, if you have any comments or differing opinions that you'd like to offer.
Yeah, I'm sorry, guys. We just been having a couple of technical difficulties here.
Sure, and we've paused the timer for now, so this application gets a full 10 minutes allotted to it.
Yes. So, and information I got here. He has some strong mission, strong goals. Like the focus in the language, leadership, and they did also do good putting together the budget. I did score them by very highly also. That's my updates.
Thank you. John, any additional comments, differing opinion? We have two higher scoring, not to put you on the spot, but if you do have any different thoughts, or even if you're in agreement, but any additional notes that you have that have not been provided by the primary and secondary.
No, yeah. As I went through it, I think conceptually, yes. I think giving specifics would have really helped. I think it covers a lot of really good points: mental health, emotional wellness, underrepresented disabilities, and then how it's delivered with plays and collaboration with artists and community leaders. But I guess that's what I'm getting at is specifics on what artists, what community leaders. So a little bit more elaboration with the points would have likely shown a different outcome as far as how I interpreted it.
Great, thank you. Any additional thoughts or comments on this application? Thoughts that you have that have not already been stated? If there are no further comments on this application, if you would please finalize your scores and let me know when you have done so. Clorin? John and Lexi. Thanks, y'all. Our next application up for review is the Chandelier Room. Clorin and John are our primary and secondary, and Clorin, whenever you're ready to begin. Oh, you came on camera and then came off. Okay, and it appears that Clorin is having technical difficulties and needs to switch over. So we will, the timing won't start until he is ready to go. I will state while we're waiting for the technical difficulties that we do have a fourth panelist who is not available for the morning session, but will be joining us after lunch. For the morning session, we will be providing a recording of the panel proceedings, so the he can change his scores if he would like. He's not required to do so. All panelists have scored.
Okay, I think I'm ready now. So this is the
Chandelier Room, correct. It's an individual artist creative business. Chandelier Room again, main thing music. Of course, the city of Austin values diversity and seeks to be inclusive with these type of applications. So I sure appreciate seeing stuff more musicians getting opportunities out here. So let's see here. Up to the program. So I see that so I believe this started look like you guys been serving the community here since the COVID pandemic. The Austin music industry has took a huge strike in that area, and also including the LGBTQ members. You know, for the Austin music community. It said that the founder's been serving over 25 years here in Austin. Leadership roles, jobs, social service, career development, networking, education, mentoring, and partnerships, and provides free low space. Chandelier Room has again been here for over 25 years, and so I've pretty much collected the information, and I did give them a pretty high score. Also, working with the radio stations in the city and the longevity here. Of course, that's undeniable. And hoping that we can look forward to see you guys continue to expand as we look forward to granting you this application here. 1 second. I'll go over. But they don't. Okay. So yeah, I believe that I gave you guys a high score because of the longevity, because of you guys being, centered in the community and helping with musicians. And so you guys have pretty much all the requirements that what we're looking for in the grant. And so kudos to you guys also for the longevity. That's my report.
Thank you. Secondary, John?
I think as I went through it, conceptually, once again, I think it's definitely headed in the right direction for a successful event. Once again, it details as far as the specifics on who the proposed artists are, and I know that sometimes that is developed afterwards, but a clear plan, or at least an idea of options and who that might be, who that might look like, would help sway probably a higher rating. But overall, it looks like a great idea and well thought out proposal across the board. They're good. Looks like they're doing really good work and have been doing good work in Austin. The marketing is laid out, like I said, conceptually clear, and especially down to like okay, for instance, when you get down to targeted ads, radio promotion, it has specific media outlets, and also with partnering with organizations like ACC, Texas School for the Blind, So, and it also seems a viable event to attract tourism. So having said all that, that's about what I got.
Thank you, John. Do any additional panelists have comments? Lexi, if you have anything you'd like to add, anything that has not already been said?
Yeah, I guess, I mean, for key constituencies and cultural activities, I gave pretty high scores, and I think their cultural activities response does fill in some of the details I was looking for. I actually gave kind of a lower score for history of service just because like they've been around for a long time, but it started as sort of like a recording and producing space to help Austin artists sort of more broadly. And then their mission sort of expanded or evolved to specifically center BIPOC creative. So I think that sort of shift is why just based on their rubric, I didn't give them as high a score on history of service. But yes, agreement on the commitment to equity and the activities, clear plan. I gave sort of medium scores in the accessibility sections just because for accessibility, I think it was not a ton beyond sort of like standard ADA accommodations that I was reading. And for language activities, I think I wanted to know more just about like beyond having an interpreter present day of like how their communications, materials, and promos would also consider language accessibility. So that was something that I noted, but sort of gave pretty high scores in line with everyone else sort of in the other categories.
Great, thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Any additional comments or thoughts on this application? Notes or comments that you have that haven't been stated by anyone else? If there are no further comments on this application, if you would please finalize your scores. Glenn, I saw your thumbs up. John and Lexi. Thanks, y'all. We will move on to our next application, which is Bohm Arts. Lexi and John are our primary and secondary. And Lexi, whenever you're ready to begin.
Yeah, so this one is Bohm Arts requesting $30,000 for their 2025 calendars that includes some workshops, curated openings for exhibitions, and just gallery spaces. One thing I appreciated about this application was just the sort of through line around diversifying Austin's art scene. Also as a collective, it's obviously member-led decision-making, and I think that sort of community voice being brought in shows up throughout. Let's see. I did, for key constituencies, note that they're sort of serving the artist community broadly, so they're not necessarily centering any of the city's priority key constituencies in their mission. So that was sort of just like a recurring note for me throughout. But artists have obviously always been at the core of their work. I gave a medium score on cultural leadership just because as a collective, the decision-making power is distributed among the members, but would have loved to hear like, who are those members? What does that makeup look like? And also just wanted to hear more about Bohm Arts' leadership in this response here. But yeah, I give a high score for their cultural activities. I think the themes of the various openings, for example, Black arts and culture, Latin American exhibits, plus being that sort of member-led collective, does sort of more specifically center key constituencies. Any other notes? I gave pretty high scores on their accommodations, accessibility answers, marketing. I did leave a note to myself that some of the numbers in the budget weren't adding up to me, but I didn't write down what I meant by that, so I don't know.
And staff has done a cursory review, but we'll take a look while the secondary, John, is giving their commentary.
I don't really have anything to add that Lexi didn't cover. That's my interpretation of the proposal reflects really close what she said.
Thank you. Looking at the budget, I do see it adds up to more than $30,000. We have advised applicants in our optional application workshops that they can provide a larger than the city request amount budget to give a holistic view of what they're saying. So I don't know, maybe if that's what you were referring to, Lexi, about it not adding up. I haven't added up the numbers. Let's see, but just a note on that it is okay, panelists, if their budget is over the $30,000 amount, because again, it gives a more holistic view of the application. So I don't know if that helps, Lexi, if you had any other comments while you were looking at the budget, or if Corinne, if you have any commentary that you would like to add to the application.
Yeah, I found my note, just confused by there being 12 artists that are each slated to receive a certain amount, but when you multiply that, it doesn't add up to what they put in that row. So it was more just like a note to self that the payment to artist line and the description weren't quite matching. But they are including, you know, payments to artists, admin support, and all the other things that we're looking for in that budget.
Great, thank you. I will say we also advise our panelists to look beyond grantsmanship to the extent possible. So a good note on that. If the applicant does score high enough to receive funding, we will work with them on the grant paperwork before we enter into, you know, sending out the payment and everything to them, where they can correct any, you know, budgetary discrepancies or anything else if they receive less than the amount that they requested and want to adjust their activities. Any additional comments on this application? Thoughts that you have that are different from what others? I saw Corinne shaking his head no. John or Lexi, any final additional thoughts? You're good. All right. If you would please finalize your scores and let me know when you've done so. Lexi? Corinne? And again, while John is finalizing his score, the 10-minute time limit, oh, and he's done. So the 10-minute time limit is only for the review of the application. We will pause the recording. And welcome back. We are back from lunch. I'm Jesus Pantel, the Cultural Funding Supervisor for the Economic Development Department, Cultural Arts Division.
Muy buenas tardes, gracias por haber regresado. Espero hayan tenido un buen almuerzo. Mi nombre es Jesús Panto. Yo soy el supervisor y seguiremos con la reunión.
And with me, we have Jasmine Patel, who is our outside equity facilitator.
Conmigo tengo Jasmine Patel, quien es el facilitador de las finanzas.
She's making sure that we keep equity front and center as we are reviewing the applications, both city staff and our review panelists here.
La señorita Jasmine está facilitando y garantizando que haya una ecualidad en lo que estamos, en la finanza que nosotros estamos proveyendo tanto de afuera hacia adentro de la ciudad.
All the panelists have reviewed the applications prior to today and provided tentative scores and written comments, and they will be verbally going over their thoughts at the review process today.
Todos los panelistas van a tener una oportunidad de revisar las peticiones y las formas que se han dado. Y eso, por favor, tómenlo en cuenta.
We are doing a number of Spanish applications right after lunch, and we will be doing those 6 or 7 Spanish applications before we move on to applications that were submitted in English.
Tenemos ciertos aplicantes que hablan completamente español. Esos son de 6 a 7. Vamos a revisar esas aplicaciones antes de continuar con las de inglés.
We have asked the panelists not to repeat any comments that have been provided by other panelists, but we do want them to provide input if they have differing thoughts because we are not scoring on consensus.
Bueno, estamos pidiendo a los panelistas que no hagan comentarios en los comentarios, valga la redundancia, de los otros panelistas para mantener la fluidez de sus comentarios.
We have asked the applicants to give constructive criticism and feedback for future improvement.
Le hemos pedido a los aplicantes que den una crítica constructiva para poder continuar en las futuras aplicaciones y futuros proyectos.
The applicants may change their scores depending on the feedback from other panelists, but they are not required to do so.
Los aplicantes podrían cambiar sus puntajes en un futuro basado en lo que ellos han aprendido o lo que han escuchado, pero no va a ser algo necesario.
We will have a maximum of 20 minutes to review each application. If we get down to about 2 minutes or less, I will start with a 2-minute warning, a 1-minute warning, a 30-second warning, and then counting down from 10 seconds.
Vamos a tener 20 minutos para hacer esta presentación. Yo les voy a recordar a los 2 minutos va a haber un recordatorio, luego al 1 minuto, cuando quede 1 minuto, si fuese necesario, otro recordatorio, luego 30 segundos antes que se terminen los 20 minutos iniciales, y luego empezaré a contar 10, 9 hasta que lleguemos a 0 y se acabará el tiempo.
If we have any technical difficulties, internet going out or anything like that, we will pause the timer so that way each application gets the full 20 minutes that it is allotted.
Cualquier problema técnico, ya sea que se llegase a desconectar el internet o algún problema técnico en ambas áreas, nosotros tomaríamos eso en cuenta y les devolveríamos el tiempo para que tengan los 20 minutos.
With that being said, we will start the review process. Our first application up for review is Adriana Serrano. John and Florin are our primary and secondary.
Bueno, vamos a empezar con la primera aplicante, Adriana Serrano, y John también va a ser el segundo aplicante.
And John, whenever you're ready to begin.
John, por favor, cuando quieras empezar.
Hi, everybody. This is for Adriana Serrano. She's applying for a $30,000 grant.
Bueno, este es para una aplicación de Adriana Serrano. Ella está aplicando para una subvención de $30,000.
This is, she clearly demonstrates her work history with the community in Austin.
Ella claramente ha demostrado el historial de trabajo con la comunidad en Austin.
This is for a textile craft, fabric type of art exhibit. She shows a lot of experience and history in the film and arts theater.
Bueno, ese es una subvención para un tipo de tela que es hecha a mano, el producto en sí. Y también ella ha mostrado un interés en lo que son las películas y el arte, el cine y el arte más bien.
So there's a very clear history of service. The specifics of the recipient, who she would be working with, the recipients, I wasn't too clear on that, who the contributors would be.
Ahora, hay un punto que quiero mencionar, que no hay una claridad exacta quiénes van a ser los beneficiarios de todo esto. No sé con quién ella estaría trabajando y para quién se entregarían estos fondos o quién sería el beneficiario de todo esto.
The cultural activities are clearly outlined and intersectionality is demonstrated, along with accessibility across the board, language as well.
El área cultural que ha sido bien demostrada, el área también con los que ella está trabajando, cómo ella trabaja y el historial que ha llevado a cabo, al igual que con la comunidad, cómo ella se desarrolla.
The one thing that I was not too clear on is the marketing. It mentions it conceptually, but could be a little bit clearer in the specifics.
Bueno, algo que no está tan claro, una cosa que no entiendo muy bien es el área de mercadeo. Cómo ella puede estar conceptualizando esta área y es algo que no me quedó muy claro cómo el mercadeo se va a manejar.
And lastly, the budget seems to meet the criteria, and that's all I got.
Y lo último es que el presupuesto está llenando el criterio o los requisitos que hemos puesto. Es todo lo que tengo.
Thank you. Secondary, Clorin.
Vamos a escuchar del secundario.
Okay. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay.
Yes.
All right. So I had just one thing, and of course, it would be to address where the fund wants ask for $30,000. So on the budget, I do want to say I like the fact that you're paying artists the most. I'm not understanding why production is more than marketing with this. Should be evenly production.
And if you can pause on your thoughts for a second, Clorin, to give the interpreter time to translate that.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Yeah, and it's a little bit hard to hear, like you're too far away.
Okay.
But,
Can you hear me better now?
Yeah, much better. Thank you, sir.
All right. I'll start over.
Okay.
Okay. So again, I see that you're asking for $30,000. I'd like to congratulate you for paying the artist the most of the portion of the funds.
Bueno, quiero felicitarte porque veo que estás pidiendo por $30,000 y veo que le estás pagando a los artistas. De todas las presentaciones, eres quien está pagando más a los artistas.
Okay. And you might want to just clear the budget by just putting, utilize the whole $30,000. I just see it coming out to $29,000. So just to be more detailed in the budget, one thing I saw.
Bueno, algo que quiero mencionar también, quizás necesites ser un poquito más detallada en el presupuesto. Tú llegas a usar todos los $30,000, llegas hasta los $29,000, pero necesitamos un poquito más de claridad.
Overall, I see that you have a great concept and rated it pretty fair.
Bueno, en general yo veo que tienes un buen concepto y es un proyecto que va a ser de mucho beneficio.
Great, thank you.
Gracias.
Are there additional panelists who want to share their thoughts?
¿Algún otro panelista que quiera compartir sus ideas o pensamientos?
Yeah, I had just a couple of notes. One just being that, I mean, I think this project really clearly centers Hispanic women and their experience both in the messaging and like literally integrating their voices into the exhibit. So I do think that sort of through line and centering the key constituency is really clear in the application.
Bueno, yo quiero mencionar que en realidad este proyecto está bien centralizado, está enfocado en lo que es la mujer hispana, cómo es el mensaje, está bastante claro, y se escuchan las voces de dichas mujeres hispanas. Creo que el concepto en eso es la clave y es algo que está bastante clarificado.
And then on the budget, my only note was that the proposal mentions a few accessibility services, but there's not a line item reflected on that in the budget. So that was just something that I flagged.
Bueno, en relación al presupuesto, yo creo que no está, tú hablas de cómo vas a tener acceso al presupuesto, pero no hay una línea por línea, vamos a decir algo claro que se ve en el presupuesto en línea por línea.
All right, any additional thoughts?
¿Alguien más?
Thank you.
Gracias.
And we do have a fourth panelist who will be joining us shortly. We will be sending a copy of the recording to him so he can change his scores for this particular application if he'd like to.
Tenemos un cuarto panelista, desafortunadamente no está con nosotros. Vamos a mandarle nosotros la grabación de este mensaje para que él pueda cambiar sus puntaje.
If there are no further comments from the panel,
No hay más comentarios de los panelistas.
if you would, please finalize your scores and let me know when you've done so.
Por favor, finalicen su puntaje y me dejan saber cuando esté todo.
John, everyone, thank you.
Bueno, gracias, John, todos.
All right, next application up for review is Suram.
La próxima aplicación para ser revisada va a ser Suram.
John is our primary and Lexi is our secondary. And John,
Yeah.
whenever you're ready to begin.
John es el primario y Lexi es la secundaria. John, cuando estés listo.
Okay, it's 1 second. It's not loading as fast as the other ones.
Un segundo, que no está cargando tan rápido como nosotros. Problemas técnicos.
Sure, and our timer will start once the primary is ready to give his commentary.
Sí, el horario va a empezar una vez que estén listos para los comentarios.
Okay, this is an application from Surem for
Bueno, esta es una aplicación de Suram para
$25,000.
$25,000.
This is the history of the key constituents that's clearly outlined.
Y es un historial que los constituyentes claves han sido bien identificados.
This is a work between it shows we're collaborating between different people. Once again, is similar to a prior one where I think one key point is partnering with one of the partners would be from the well, it's called Huirarica or Huichol from Mexico. So that would be the indigenous, one of the indigenous populations.
Bueno, es un trabajo colaborativo que muestra que está trabajando con Huichol o Huichechita, que es parte indígena del pueblo mexicano.
So it's clearly outlined how Surem is carrying on that culture. So that's part of it. The other part, the dance, the regional dance is also clearly outlined. Once again, the event seems to translate into something of a tourist destination for nationally and internationally. The intersectionality is covered, accessibility. Language translations mentioned the specifics could have been a little bit clearer.
And John, can you give the translator time to translate those?
Yeah.
Thank you, John. Bueno, este es un trabajo colaborativo que muestra mucho un interés cultural al demostrar la cultura indígena mexicana. En la danza lo cubre muy bien, está cubriendo muy bien la danza, el arte, y es algo que está trabajando, creo que a nivel turístico, es decir, sería una presentación para nivel turístico, a donde se demostraría lo que es la cultura, el historial, por medio de la danza. Algo que no está un poco claro es el lenguaje, de cómo eso traería un impacto para la comunidad. Pero sí está hablando muy bien de la accesibilidad que existe, de lo que trae la cultura pasada a mostrarlo lo que es ahora. Go ahead, sir.
Lastly, the budget is, as mentioned earlier, good portion of it goes to the dancers and the artists. The budget seems to all line up, and that's all I got.
Bueno, y lo último que quisiera mencionar es en el presupuesto. El presupuesto pareciera que la mayor parte del presupuesto va a los bailarines, perdón, a las personas que están bailando, va también hacia los artistas. Ahí creo que todo está bien alineado y muy claro. Eso es lo que tengo.
Lexi?
Flexing.
I echo a lot of what John said. I gave high scores in sort of the key constituencies and history of service. I just think that preserving Mexican culture, specifically indigenous, has been pretty central to their mission, and it shows up throughout the application.
Bueno, yo eco o digo lo mismo que John dijo. Creo que hay ciertos constituyentes que son la clave en este proyecto. Creo que el poder preservar el historial indígena de la cultura de México y poderlo demostrar en estos días es la clave del componente de este proyecto que me ha llamado mucho la atención, y creo que el presupuesto también está bien clarificado. Esto es lo que tengo.
The one thing I would add for language accessibility, I actually gave a high score there because I think there was a plan for offering programming and materials in English and Spanish, as well as the relevant indigenous language when it made sense for that workshop.
Bueno, algo que quisiera añadir es en el acceso al lenguaje. Pareciera que ellos están planeando hacer panfletos e información tanto en español, en inglés, incluso en el lenguaje original, que es el lenguaje de la comunidad de antes. Creo que eso es una clave que cubre bien a la cultura indígena y cómo ellos hablaban.
That's
Great,
everything I had.
thank you, Lexi. Are there any additional comments from panelists?
Otro comentario de los panelistas.
Thank you.
Gracias.
There are no further comments from the panel. Additional last thoughts?
No comentarios de los panelistas, son últimos comentarios.
If you, I will also say we do have a fourth panelist who will be joining us shortly. We will send a copy of this recording to him so he can change his scores if he would like to.
Tenemos un cuarto panelista que está a punto de estar acá con nosotros. Vamos a mandar esta grabación para ver si él quiere cambiar su puntaje.
If you would please, panelists, finalize your scores and let me know when you've done so.
Panelistas, por favor, finalicen el puntaje y me avisan.
Clurin, Lexi,
Lexi.
Mine doesn't look the same as the other ones. It looks like I saved it, I closed it, but so I'm not sure. It just looks a little different.
El mío no se ve como los otros. Yo lo guardé en el sistema, pero no se ve como los demás.
Okay, we'll wait a little bit for you to figure that out. The 20-minute timer was only for the panel review. You'll have some time to finalize your scores here.
Bueno, vamos a darles unos minutos. Los 20 minutos nada más serán para la revisión de los panelistas en este mes tiempo.
And I believe John gave us thumbs up.
Yeah.
Thank you. Next application up for review is Casa Costura. Lexi and Clurin are primary and secondary.
La próxima es Casa Cultura. Lexi será el primero.
Lexi?
Yes. So this is Casa Costura requesting $27,000. It's for a series of 6 community workshops for students to design and make custom clothing, which would all culminate in a sort of catwalk or gallery.
Bueno, este viene de Casa Costura, que están pidiendo $27,000. Este proyecto sería que ellos pondrían 6 talleres donde entrenarían a jóvenes para hacer este trabajo y lo que culminaría en un show de modelaje por las costuras que ellos han hecho.
What I really liked about this application was just the focus on culturally significant clothing in the workshops and the intentionality of offering the workshops and materials, all of them in Spanish.
Lo que me gustó de este proyecto es que están ellos ofreciendo lo que es un alcance hacia la cultura dentro de la costura, tanto como lo están ofreciendo en ambos idiomas, inglés y español.
So I gave pretty high scorings in their key constituencies, their history of service, cultural leadership, etc.
Y yo le di un puntaje bastante alto basado en las claves de los constituyentes y el alcance que ellos están teniendo de manera cultural.
The only big thing that I flagged really was in the marketing plan. I didn't think there was a ton of detail for what that would look like, what platforms they would use, who they would reach out to. So just wanted a little bit more detail in the marketing section.
La única parte que yo puse más atención, que necesito más entendimiento, es en el área de mercadeo, porque no veo que no están poniendo el énfasis necesario cómo ellos van a alcanzar a la comunidad para dejarles saber que este proyecto existe. Es lo único que falta, un poquito más de claridad en el mercadeo.
That's everything I had.
Es todo lo que tengo.
Lauren?
Overall budget, would like to see more detail. Very creative, very cultivated, for sure. And that's all I got for that.
En general creo que se necesita más detalle en el área cultural y cómo ellos piensan alcanzar con este proyecto a la comunidad. Solo que tengo.
All right. Are there additional comments from panelists?
Otros comentarios de los panelistas.
Well, panelists are thinking if they have any additional comments. We do have a fourth panelist who will be joining us shortly. We will make a copy of this recording available if you would like to change his scores.
Solo para recordarles que tenemos un cuarto panelista que está a punto de reunirse con nosotros. Esta grabación estará completamente disponible por si él quiere cambiar su calificación.
If there are no further comments from the panel,
Si no hay más comentarios de los panelistas,
please finalize your scores.
por favor finalicen el puntaje.
Lexi,
Alexia.
Lauren, and John. Next application up for review is Cacao Productions. Lauren and Lexi are our primary and secondary.
La próxima es Cacao Productions. Tenemos a los dos personas principales y secundarias que van a dar su informe.
Lauren?
Lauren.
Okay, so what I have, I'll start off with my overall view. The grant started strong and gradually got broader. I was hoping to hear more about the details on the leadership team.
Voy a empezar con eso. Bueno, yo creo que yo quería escuchar más acerca del equipo de liderazgo.
Also, critical ways you all incorporate intersectionality, I'm sorry.
Y también en general cómo van a incorporar la interseccionalidad en ese proyecto.
ADA and language accessibility also.
ADA y el acceso al lenguaje también.
And more definitive or just broken down portions for your budget.
También más el beneficio o cómo están dividiendo el presupuesto.
However, you guys are doing great work in the community. The marketing strategy looks strong.
De lo contrario, ustedes están haciendo un buen trabajo en la comunidad. El plan de mercadeo se ve muy fuerte.
The cultural leadership, it's not enough detail in this section. It's very general and broad answers. Would love to see you guys do a better leadership background or a profile on one or two personnels.
Ahora, el único punto que quiero mostrar es el liderazgo en el personal, las personas que están a cargo de este proyecto y los trabajadores. Creo que sería bueno mostrar uno, dos, tres de los líderes, su historial, su biografía de quiénes son y de dónde vienen. Creo que eso sería importante.
For the marketing, I would like to see a strong outreach plan.
En el mercadeo, a mí me gustaría ver un alcance más claro de cómo piensan ustedes alcanzar a la comunidad para dejarles saber de ese proyecto.
And just to top off for your budget, more detailed line items or just a more of a breakdown on the line items. Accessibility and services weren't specified.
Y también en el presupuesto sería algo más claro de detallar bien la línea por línea la descripción y explicar bien cómo se manejaría ese presupuesto.
My overall score was a mid-range score for this one.
En general, mi calificación sería en términos medio para este proyecto.
That's all I got. Thank you.
Es todo lo que tengo. Gracias,
Lexi?
Lexi.
Yeah, so for Cacao Production, my overall score for their application was pretty high.
Ahora, para Cacao Production, mi calificación en general es bastante alta.
What I liked about the application was the focus on not just entertaining, but also building community and celebrating Latin American traditions, specifically Christmas traditions.
Lo que me gustó en ese proyecto es cómo ellos están mostrando la importancia de los festejos navideños en el pueblo hispano. Creo que ha sido muy, muy importante esa área.
The categories that I gave sort of more medium scores and sort of echoing Clarence's notes that they could use more detail, I think, were accessibility, marketing, and the budget.
En las categorías que le di, creo que ha estado en medio. Creo que yo estoy de acuerdo con lo que dijo mi compañero, que debería ser un poco más énfasis de más claro en el área de mercadeo y cómo piensan alcanzar a la comunidad.
But I will say I actually gave them a pretty high score in cultural leadership. I think their organizational leadership works with an advisory board consisting of members of the Hispanic community and arts and culture experts that just kind of reflect the constituencies that they're serving.
En el área cultural creo que le he dado un puntaje bastante alto porque es bastante claro cómo ellos trabajan con las diferentes personas especializadas en culturas, especializadas en cómo alcanzar a la comunidad y comunicarse con ellos. Creo que eso están haciendo un buen trabajo en esa área.
Those are all of the notes that I had for them.
Todas las notas que yo tengo para ellos.
Thank you, Lexi. Are there any additional panelists who have comments they'd like to add?
Gracias, Alexi. ¿Hay alguien más que quiere hacer un comentario?
Things that haven't been stated yet?
Algo que no se haya dicho.
Maybe it's been stated, but maybe in a different way. Where I think I was looking at the score. I gave them a somewhat higher score across the board. Conceptually, the timing of during Hispanic Heritage Month, the Christmas, having an interactive live music show, workshop thing, type of event seems to be a really good concept. And they mentioned tourism from other city. In other words, the bigger the event, the more tourism it's going to bring in from other cities and Texas. I know we're not supposed to say. I think what I'm trying to say is I think that if it was clearly outlined with the details of how that's going to be implemented, it would give people a much better idea of what the event would look like. In other words, they may not. It's the way that it's written may not match. I know this is probably a run-on sentence, but with a little bit of clarification, would go a long ways.
Creo que ya se mencionó, pero hay una manera que quiero mencionarlo de diferente manera. Es decir, creo que están hablando de la música cultural. Pienso que el hecho que quieran poner un énfasis en lo que es el espíritu navideño y la cultura, cómo se celebra en la tradición mexicana, creo que es algo bien importante. Van a tocar música del tiempo navideño, pero también no está un poco claro cómo ellos piensan hacer el mercadeo, cómo le van a avisar a las ciudades alrededor para atraer a los diferentes turistas, tanto internos como extranjeros, para que vengan a ver este evento. Creo que si ellos clarificarían un poco más cómo ellos van a tener este alcance dentro de la comunidad y afuera en otras áreas, harían un impacto más fuerte. Creo que eso es lo que necesitan ellos, clarificar un poco más el área del mercadeo para poder en realidad canalizar bien cómo ellos van a alcanzar las diferentes comunidades.
All right, thank you.
Any additional comments or thoughts that have not been stated already?
¿Algún comentario adicional o algo que no se ha dicho?
If not, please finalize your scores and let me know when you've done so.
Por favor, finalicen el puntaje y me avisan cuando ya lo hayan terminado.
John, Florin,
John, Tren,
Lexi,
Lexi.
and Sam, your camera's off.
Y Sam, tu cámara está apagada.
And you came in right at the beginning of this application, so you didn't miss much. I don't know if you want to finalize your score on this one or just watch the recording.
Viniste exactamente al final de esta presentación. No sé si quieres clarificar todo.
And what we're doing is if you are finalizing your score, just give a thumbs up or raise your hand or something so I know you've you've finalized your score.
Si ya terminaste con el puntaje, nada más dame una señal que ya está finalizado.
Since I'm just getting back, the finalization is in the same program.
Yeah, it's in the same program. If you don't have any changes to your scores, you don't need to do anything.
Sí, la calificación es en el mismo programa. Si no tienes que hacer ningún cambio, sí queda.
But if you do want to change your score, you just change it like how you had initially put it in.
Pero si quieres cambiar tu puntaje, entonces lo haces, como inicialmente se habló.
It doesn't look like I have access to modifying.
You. All right. If you do have any changes to your score, if you can make a note of that, if there was anything that you did want to change based on the feedback.
Cualquier cambio que quieras hacer a tu puntaje final, debido a los comentarios o lo que se ha escuchado.
And you'll have time to make any updates if you'd like later on today once the panel concludes.
Vas a tener tiempo también más tarde hoy para terminar con la calificación.
All right, so we'll move on to our next application.
La próxima aplicación.
Montenegro Producciones, Florin and John are primary and secondary.
Montenegro Producciones es la siguiente y John será el evaluador.
Florin?
Lauren?
You're pretty soft. It's hard to hear you.
I
No
just
se
repeat
escucha.
that. Who's up next? Just repeat
Oh,
that.
you're up next, Clorin.
But I'm saying, what?
Oh, for Montenegro Producciones.
Producciones Montenegro.
Okay. Okay. Montenegro Productions. Okay, so this application here got a fairly low score for me. I think this grant is heading in the right direction though. My advice is to get more organized with the ideas and more intention.
Bueno, mi calificación en esto ha sido bastante bajo. Creo que mi consejo para ellos sería que sean más claros y organizados en las ideas y que sean más, que tengan una mejor intención en lo que tratan de hacer.
Your mission, and be more specific and focus on clarifying your mission, vision, and activities.
Y sean más enfocados en clarificar lo que es la visión y las actividades.
And just more measurable goals and outcomes. I'd like to see more measurable goals and outcomes.
Y quisiera ver unas medidas que se puedan, unas metas que se puedan medir mejor y que fueran más palpables en alcance.
It seemed to be missing its mission, okay, for the mission portion, and slightly touched on key constituents, but it's missing things in the mission. I'm not sure if the key constituents are at risk of being insured as well.
Creo también que los más claro en los constituyentes claves, en la misión, y eso tiene que ser más detallado, más clarificado, con una meta de mejor alcance y que esté bien identificado. ¿Y cómo se va a hacer eso?
I did not see any information on history.
Yo no vi ninguna información en el historial.
I did not see any info on leadership.
Tampoco vi ninguna información en liderazgo.
The cultural activity isn't clear either.
La actividad cultural tampoco está clara.
Okay, it says theatrical events, but it seems that you're having something to do with putting on a play or being involved in the theater according to the budget.
Creo que habla de ciertos eventos teatrales, más bien no especifica qué tipo de eventos o cómo van a ser esos eventos.
I would love a better focus and more detail on the actual activity needing for the funding.
Por lo tanto, me gustaría una mejor clarificación en las actividades que se necesitan, para lo cual se necesitan los fondos.
Intersectional inclusion notes, not enough detail to get any real answers.
Unas notas en el curso de interacción, no hay suficiente clarificación en dichas notas.
And what I mean by that, it mentions inclusive collaborations to promote equity and inclusion, but the answer seems too broad.
Pero lo que yo digo con eso es que se menciona la ecualidad y la inclusión, pero no se dice cómo se va a hacer eso y cómo se va a medir y cómo se va a alcanzar.
Disability, there's nothing for that, or language accessibility, there's nothing for that either.
No hay nada en una discapacidad, tampoco en el acceso al lenguaje, no hay nada.
Marketing, looks like this process is in its development phase.
Mercadeo, parece que este proceso está apenas en la etapa de desarrollo.
Was not clear on the marketing, but it seems though that they plan to doing some type of marketing research and brand development for the event.
No estaban claros en lo que es el evento en sí. Creo que se necesita un poco más de claridad en eso.
The budget notes I have, the budget was broke down, but still unclear how you're going to support the narrative and what specific event the funds are going to go to.
El presupuesto creo que no está siendo especificado en los eventos y cuáles son los eventos específicos para que esto se vaya a llevar a cabo.
My overall score is very low for this application.
Para
That's
esta
all I have.
aplicación, mi calificación fue bastante baja debido a estas razones antes mencionadas.
John?
There's not much I can add other than I had to basically go off of the samples of previous work to get an idea of what the project would look like and kind of use that as a basis for well, to get an idea what it was about. So I think there was like some like reading between the lines as far as previous work and the intent of the current project.
Bueno, creo que no hay mucho que añadir, exceptuando que no hay una claridad. Yo me basé todo esto en los trabajos previos que se han hecho, pero no hay algo claro que identifique cuáles son las metas y los tipos de alcance que va a haber en este proyecto.
That's all I got.
Es todo.
Thank you. Just a follow-up question, John. Were there things that you saw that were done well in this application?
Una pregunta, ¿tú
Yeah.
viste algo que se hizo bien en esta aplicación?
Yes, well, including like YouTube links where you can, get a full idea of the well, like a complete idea of what the project is going for and the potential. That was a big help.
Creo que el potencial que existe en ese proyecto y lo que se podría hacer con dicho proyecto, creo que ha sido eso le daría un buen puntaje y sería de muy bien.
And then there's also I'm not exactly sure what their cartas de apoyo, kind of like referral letters or from other people that have a proven, a documented history of work in Austin producing successful events.
Y también hay ciertas cartas de apoyo,
Sí.
Que son cartas que vienen hablando de los otros proyectos anteriores, cómo han sido de beneficio. Creo que eso ha sido algo muy bueno.
Thank you, John.
Gracias, John.
Are there additional panelists who want to share their thoughts?
¿Algún
On
otro
this app-
panelista que quiera decir algo?
I would just add, I think that the budget was actually super helpful in this proposal because it sort of gets into the specifics of theater production. And so I do think it sort of helps contextualize what maybe was a little bit more like broadly around theater in their application. So I do think that the budget helped zoom it in a little bit, which is what I think a lot of us were looking for.
Algo positivo también sería el presupuesto, porque viendo el presupuesto nos ayuda a clarificar y a canalizar bien las ideas, los metas y conceptualizar exactamente lo que ellos pretenden hacer por medio, viendo el presupuesto nos da bastante clarificación.
All right. Any additional comments?
¿O de algún otro comentario?
Thank you.
There are no further comments.
No más comentarios.
Please finalize your scores and let me know when you've done so.
Finalicen sus puntajes y me avisa cuando estén.
John, Lauren, and Lexi, I see you finalize your scores.
Y me avisan, por favor.
And Sam, are you able to access, or are you still having technical difficulties?
Sam, ¿te puedes conectar o todavía tienes problemas?
It still leaves me without the opportunity to modify.
Me da la oportunidad de poderlo modificar.
Okay, if you do have any changes, just kind of write them down and we'll be sure that we can get those updated later.
Bueno, me avisa cuando la hayas pueda terminar.
In panel, we're close to a scheduled break, but we have 2 more applications. We only have the translator here for a limited time, so we're going to go ahead and continue through our 2 remaining Spanish applications.
Bueno, tenemos un descanso ahorita, pero nos quedan 2 aplicantes más y el intérprete solo está por unos minutos más con nosotros.
All right, next application up for review is expansion of dance programs and Alma Latina event. Sam and Lexi are our primary and secondary.
Ahora vamos a escuchar el Alma Latina. Alexis va a ser una de las que va a decir qué pasó.
Sam, whenever you're ready to begin.
Sam, cuando estés listo.
So this is the expansion of dance programs and Alma Latina event. They are offering a community event celebrating Hispanic and Latino cultures through art displays, music performances, and showcases.
Este es un proyecto donde están tratando de demostrar la cultura hispana por medio de diferentes danzas, música y folclore.
Also offering free or low-cost dance courses representing these cultures through belly dancing and Latin fusions.
También están ofreciendo gratis o a precio módico clases de la danza, cómo se puede influenciar por medio de otras culturas.
So some of the positives I saw with this application, it sounds like a very important program to offer a variety of communities around Austin.
Lo importante que vi en este proyecto es cómo están dando este proyecto a las comunidades alrededor de Austin y cómo Austin y sus comunidades se podrían beneficiar de dicho proyecto.
The dance classes are beneficial to bringing people from a variety of communities together, and then continuing cultural practices that are important to that community, as well as the overall cultural displays and music performances and showcases.
Esas clases de danza es una oportunidad para poder mostrar a otras culturas lo que es una cultura hispana, la danza, y cómo poderse conectar los unos con los otros.
I scored medium high throughout each of the areas.
Yo lo califiqué de medio alto en las áreas específicas.
Some of the higher levels were in the naming of key constituencies, leadership, language supports, and budget.
En los niveles altos que le di ha sido acerca de los constituyentes claves, el lenguaje y el alcance que van a tener dentro de la comunidad.
Some of the areas where I needed a little bit more information were the activities. I think that there was a description of the activity and timeline, but not necessarily enough information about how those activities would be pulled off or how they would be presented.
Algo que necesitaba un poquito más de clarificación es cómo se va a presentar estas metas, cómo se van a hacer estos alcances y una línea de tiempo, cómo se va a ir haciendo paso a paso estos diferentes alcances.
One of my lower scoring areas was the intersectionality, because there was just a hinting towards this intersectionality or how these communities come together. There were lots of communities named, but not how there is a cross representation between those communities and this activity.
Uno de los puntajes más bajos que yo le di es cómo se va a poder conectar las diferentes culturas y diferentes áreas, cómo ellos piensan traer una área con la otra y conectar diferentes culturas en la conectividad.
It did seem that most of that in the naming of most of the communities, it was bringing together a very wide breadth of groups, not necessarily with the intentionality behind intersectionality.
Una cosa que yo vi es cómo ellos están trayendo diferentes grupos en sí, pero no algo en común en el área de la comunidad o histórico.
One of the areas that needed the most information was the support for people with disabilities. There was no specific information beyond the recommended ADA supports.
Una de las áreas que necesita bastante apoyo es en el área de los discapacitados, como se ve que no hay una clarificación de cómo ellos piensan al alcanzar a ellos, a esta comunidad que necesita ser alcanzada por medio de este proyecto.
But overall, I scored this project in the medium-high range.
Pero en general yo le di una calificación entre medio alto.
Lexi?
Alexi.
Yeah, I gave this application an overall fairly high score.
Yo le di a esta aplicación en general una calificación alta.
I think the only area that I did give a lower score, sort of in line with what Sam said, was on the accessibility accommodations. What was listed wasn't necessarily beyond like basic ADA accommodations.
Creo que lo único que no le di una calificación alta es en las comodidades o facilidades para el grupo de ADA. Pareciera que no hay una clarificación cómo se acomodarían estas personas con discapacidades.
One thing I really liked is that their key constituency, so Hispanic and Latinx communities, would not just be clients, but also involved in the planning and executing of the events and the classes.
Algo que queda claro es cómo la comunidad hispana y la Latinx comunidad va a ser incluida en ese proyecto, porque no solo van a ser como un alcance, sino que ellos van a poder participar por medio de la conectividad.
The only thing I would add is for intersectionality. I thought that their response to this question didn't necessarily address it, but I did think that throughout the application, there was an intersectional approach considering sort of the intersection of gender, race, and social class. So sort of taking all of that into account beyond just this answer, I did end up giving them a higher score for intersectionality as well.
En la área de la interseccionalidad le di un puntaje bastante alto porque veo que están trayendo lo que es los diferentes géneros, diferentes rangos de las diferentes comunidades con diferentes puntos de vista con sus finanzas, cómo ellos están viniendo juntos y cómo ellos están interactuando entre sí, tanto los diferentes géneros como los diferentes rangos de las comunidades.
But that is everything I would add to what Sam has already said.
Pero es todo lo que yo añadiría.
All right, thank you, panelists. Are there additional comments related to this application?
¿Hay algún otro comentario?
All right, thank you.
Thank you. If there are no further comments, please finalize your scores and let me know when you've done so.
Bueno, terminen su calificación y me avisan, por favor.
Lauren? Lexi? John? And Sam, I'm guessing you're still having problems. Oh, no. You got your score in. Okay, great. Thank you.
Gracias.
Our next application up for review is Guelaguetza Austin 2025. John and Sam are our primary and secondary.
Vamos al próximo proyecto, será la Galaxy Austin. John va a ser el primero.
John?
Adelante, John.
Yeah, Galagetza Austin was started couple decades ago. A dance troupe organization, community organization, if you will. They are applying for a $25,000 grant. This ended up being mid to high score based on the information provided. They seem to be well established, promoting the or carrying on the tradition of specific dance cultures, mainly related to indigenous, like Oaxacan dance culture.
Bueno, este grupo es que Galaxy Austin está pidiendo $25,000 en subvención. Este es un grupo que ya tiene 2 décadas de venir trabajando juntos. Este es un grupo de una danza verdadera. Yo le digo una calificación alta porque las metas y sus puntos, lo que ellos quieren hacer están claramente bien definidos. Creo que ellos están siendo bien específicos en el tipo de danza que quieren ellos llevar a cabo, lo cual muestra el área indígena del área de Oaxaca en México. Creo que es un proyecto bastante claro y bastante con metas bien clarificadas. Go ahead, sir.
The majority of it going to pay the artists, including 36 dancers at well, as an example, the 36 dancers at $250 and 20 musicians at $200 is shows giving, but contributing and giving back to the community. The history of service is there, cultural leadership activities, intersectionality, accessibility was mentioned. That could have been a little bit more clear, but it was clear enough. Marketing could have been a little bit more specific as far as exactly what it mentions online, but specifics would help get a better idea to gauge the probable success of the event. That's all I got.
Bueno, creo que en esa área se necesita, estaba ellos bastante con un buen alcance, una buena calificación en el área cultural, cómo ellos piensan alcanzar las diferentes culturas. Creo que en el liderazgo también sacaron una buena calificación, definitivamente bien definidos los líderes. Creo que en la interacción o interactualidad, es decir, la intersección a lo que es las diferentes culturas, trayéndolas juntas en una intersección está bastante bien. Creo que necesitan estar un poquito más claro en lo que es la accesibilidad. Y en el área de mercadeo, un poco más específico lo que ellos quieren hacer, cómo lo van a hacer, muestran que lo quieren hacer en línea, más sin embargo no dicen cómo lo van a hacer en línea. Creo que ellos necesitan un poco más de especificación de cómo ellos harían estos alcances en línea. Es todo lo que tengo por el momento.
Sam?
Sam, ahora
Okay,
vamos a escuchar de Sam.
As reviewing the application, I saw some of the areas that I scored quite high in would be the constituencies, leadership, and the budget, the use of the budget.
Bueno, la área que yo le di una calificación bastante alta es en los constituyentes, en el liderazgo y en el presupuesto. Creo que estas áreas están bastante claras.
The areas that I struggled a little bit with were history, activities, and the accessibility. While there is a long history of the organization, the explanation of how the events have occurred or what the event truly is, I couldn't find that within the application. Tried to find a little bit more about the information about the actual event, but they did give a good history on where and when those events have occurred.
Creo que el área que necesitamos un poquito más de clarificación es en el área de accesibilidad, en el área histórica, cómo ellos piensan llevar todo esto a cabo. Creo que necesitamos un poco de más clarificación en todo eso.
So it would be good to understand a little bit more about what is the specifics of this event, if it's going to be, where it's going to be staged, where it's going to be held, how it will be presented to audiences. That bit of information was missing for me.
Entonces sería bueno entender cómo y a dónde ellos van a hacer esas presentaciones y para quién, es decir, la audiencia y cómo ellos van a hacer esas presentaciones y los locales a dónde.
And then with accessibility, I struggled to find more than what is considered appropriate for following ADA.
Ahora, con la accesibilidad yo batallé un poco de darle un puntaje apropiado más alto del 88, es lo que le di yo.
And beyond that, I still scored this at a medium-high level.
Aparte de todo eso, yo le di una calificación de mediano alto.
Thank you, Sam.
Gracias, Sam.
Are there additional panelists who'd like to share their thoughts?
Otro panelista que quiera compartir sus pensamientos.
Any panelists who have already gone, who have any thoughts they'd like to add?
¿Alguien más que quiera añadir algo?
There are no further comments.
¿Tiene comentarios?
Please finalize your scores and let me know when you've done so.
Finalicen su calificación y me avisan cuando ya lo hayan terminado.
Cloren, John, Lexi.
Lauren, John y Lexi.
We got Cloren.
Wait for me.
Now we're waiting on Sam. Oh, okay, and Sam is good. All right, we'll go ahead and pause the recording.
Bueno, vamos a pausar la grabación.
And we are back from break. We do have one of our panelists may be experiencing technical difficulties. We are recording this, so we will provide the recording to him in case he does want to change any of his scores based on the feedback provided by other panelists. Panelists are not required to change their scores, but they can, depending on the feedback they receive from their fellow panelists. Panelists are not scoring on consensus. They may have different takes on each application, and that is fine. They have reviewed all of the applications prior to today, and so are just giving their commentary and takes. We're asking them not to repeat anything that's been stated by previously by other panelists. If they do have similar thoughts, but they do have a different note or something that has not been covered by one of the other panelists, we ask them to provide those, but again, not to repeat anything that has been previously stated. All right, so our next application up for review is Soul Radio. John and Lexi are our primary and secondary, and John, whenever you're ready to begin. Oh, and you're muted, John. And so the 10-minute timer will start whenever John is ready to start giving his commentary.
Okay, so this is for Soul Radio to produce a multi-series event based on Dr. Maya Angelou. This is from, let's see, Gregory Peacock, I believe, working with a producer, choreographer, and basically with some input for some other people for $30,000. This is really well laid out, covering all the bullet points. The being a multi-part exhibit gives a lot of, it looks like it gives a lot of opportunity to cover a lot of ground between art exhibit, dance, ballet, modeling and design expo, models and designers of all types, highlighting Austin locals. The theatrical experience portion of it with seems to describe well the actors, dancers, musicians, all from diverse backgrounds. So let me see. The key constituencies. There's a proven history of work, previous successful work. Cultural leadership is there, cultural activities, intersectionality, accessibility is covered. One note, the only thing I could see that would help clarify it for me would be to it's a lot of ground to cover with a project of this size. I get it, but maybe specific mentioning of who the different artists would be. Now, once again, I understand it's difficult to do that, especially in multiple event proposal. So you're dealing with musicians, ballet dancers, artists, choreographers, all this. But other than that, real straightforward. And that's all the input I have on it.
Thank you. Secondary, Lexi?
Yeah, I think that this application, their work pretty explicitly centers African American communities and women through their work. I gave them high scores as well on, key constituencies, the cultural activity, history of service. Let's see. For cultural leadership, I did give a medium score. I think that the applicant clearly has lived experience and represents the key constituencies. I do think it would have been good to hear about like who are the other decision makers? How do they reflect the audiences? So I think that was one piece for me that I wanted a little bit more information on. Let's see, high points for intersectionality, accessibility. I did think that the language accessibility section was lacking a few details as far as just like what languages would be offered. Would that be like the materials, the volunteers speaking those languages? So I think just a little bit more information there would have been super helpful. But yeah, that's everything for me. I gave them, I think, like a medium high score overall.
Are there any additional panelists who'd like to share their thoughts on this application? Anything that hasn't already been said? Okay.
There are no further thoughts on this comment or thoughts on this application, comments on this application? Seeing as there are none, if you would please finalize your scores and let me know when you've done so. Sam? John and Lexi, thank you. Our next application up for review is Inspire Change Everywhere. Lexi and Sam are our primary and secondary. Before they get started, we do have a fourth panelist, Corinne, but he appears to be experiencing technical difficulties. So we are recording this application process. And so we will provide the recording to him afterwards if he does want to change any of his scores. With all of that being said, Lexi, whenever you're ready to begin.
Yes, so this is Inspire Change Everywhere. They're requesting $30,000 for the Art of Civility and Etiquette programming. So free and low-cost workshops focused on civility, etiquette, social poise, as well as mentorship pairing. What I liked about this application was, one, I think they have a focus on accessible workshops and also cultural sensitivity within their programming. I did think that within the key constituencies and history of service, since they do sort of seek to like broadly serve youth in the community, I think that equity was less explicit in this application. So I did give them a lower score in those categories. Yeah, similar note for cultural activities. Just like their etiquette programming broadly serves sort of diverse youth in the community, but it's not really explicitly centering any of the priority key constituencies. I did think that within the accessibility section, they mostly just focused on sort of ADA access and didn't necessarily expand upon that. Let's see. In the language accessibility section, they noted that they were sort of working towards being able to provide more resources in English and Spanish. So I gave them a medium score there because they sort of acknowledged like what they were doing to be able to improve that, but not being quite there yet. I did give them a high score for their budget as well. I think it included all of the information we were looking for. But with everything factored in, I think mostly just because I didn't see equity as centered within their mission and their programming, I gave them a overall medium low score.
Thank you. Secondary, Sam?
Yeah, so through my understanding, I focused on the cultural activities as one of the big areas and the accessibility as well. Again, accessibility being limited to the ADA. And then I wanted more information on when they use the terms of civility and etiquette, of what civility and etiquette are they speaking about? I'm trying to understand just the how are we teaching, what are we teaching, and who are we teaching, I think was the big question that kept going on through my head. So that lowered scores in cultural activities and intersectionality, because that conversation of broad strokes of who this was going to be accessible to, and then what was going to be explained through these different workshops and through the talk show podcast as well. But beyond that, I didn't have anything else extra to add.
Thank you, Sam. John, would you like to share some of your thoughts related to this application?
No, I think it's been covered.
Awesome, thank you. All right, any additional comments? Thank you.
Any additional thoughts, diverging opinions? If there are no further comments on this application, if you would please, panelists, finalize your scores and let me know when you've done so. Lexi, Sam, and John, thank you. Our next application up for review is VIS Curatorial. Corinne and Lexi are primary and secondary. Corinne, are you back? He's been having technical difficulties or something, is not available. So Lexi will be our primary, and John, can you take on the secondary for this one? And then Lexi, whenever you are ready to begin.
Sorry, we're on VIS curatorial, right?
Yeah,
okay.
Correct.
Cool. Okay, so this is VIS curatorial requesting $28,000. They're doing 3 group exhibitions featuring QT BIPOC, so queer and trans BIPOC artists, as well as an artist residency. So that culminates in a sort of 4th exhibition. What I liked about this application was, I mean, there's a very clear and intersectional focus with the sort of queer and trans BIPOC artist lens that centers their mission. So with that in mind, I did give them high scores in their key constituencies and history of service, as well as cultural leadership and cultural activities, and intersectionality and inclusion. I think the things that I had a few more notes on were accessibility. I think just the accommodations listed didn't necessarily go beyond the sort of standard ADA recommendations. For language accessibility, I had a few notes around like who will actually implement it, if and how that involves trained professionals. I think with marketing, you know, it's clear they're using multiple platforms, and I see efforts to reach existing and new audience members, but I think that there were a few sort of groups that we were looking for that I didn't necessarily see reflected in the plan. So tourists, audience members with disabilities and or whose primary language isn't English. I just didn't see any specifics about that in the marketing plan. Within the budget, I gave them a sort of medium high score in there. The only flag I had there was that there wasn't any sort of line item reflecting any accessibility accommodations or language access services, anything along those lines. So with all of that factored in together, it came out to like a medium high score for them.
Great, thank you. John?
The same medium high score. I think it was laid out clear with, I think that even within, so naming specific, just getting down more to the specific level as far as who they are. I know that it comes across as part of the idea is to seek out artists with less opportunities, but maybe having like a clear idea of who that may be for this proposal might have helped. But other than that, same.
Thank you. Sam, do you have any thoughts to add to the discussion?
Jumping back over.
Anything that you would have liked to see?
Throughout, let me bring up my score real quick here. I don't see anything that hasn't already been addressed. ADA is one of the bigger ones that I addressed in mine. And then continue to expand on language accessibility. And then marketing is always one that's just they're describing their marketing plan to make sure that they are reaching specifically out to audiences with disability or those without the primary language of English, and efforts for tourists as well.
Thank you. Are there any additional comments related to this application? Thank you.
There are no further comments, thoughts that you have that haven't been stated already. Seeing as there are none, if you would please finalize your scores and let me know when you've done so. Lexi? Sam? I see you, Sam. Thank you. And John was taking care of something and he has his score finalized too. Great. Thanks, everyone. Our next application up for review is Santa Cruz Collective. Sam and Corinne are our primary and secondary. Sam has been experiencing technical difficulties or something. His icon is still here, but he has not been back since our break. So we'll see if he's back in time to be secondary. If not, we may have Lexi have you, then you're doing 2 in a row with Sam, which is fine. So we'll have Sam start on this. Let's see if Corinne is not back by the time Sam finishes his comments. We'll have you go. And the 10-minute timer will start whenever Sam is ready to start giving his comments.
All right, so this is the Santa Cruz Collective requesting $30,000 to develop a music album representing a broad group of cultures that make up East Austin. Also feature a live showcase and the varying types of music involved. And then their quote of the primary goal of educating and entertaining. The things I really liked about this application is that they are looking for a great way to display the vibrant culture of East Austin and helping to maintain those cultures and highlight those cultures during a time of rapid gentrification on that area of town. Some of the areas of success, language accessibility, that was really interesting the way they highlighted that it was not just going to be featuring the traditional dialects or the dialects of traditional Spanish, but moving beyond that to a variety of dialects within the Spanish language, and how to also provide translations for that as well. And then some of the areas of need were in accessibility and cultural activities, more on accessibility, they're staying within the ADA guidelines and not making an expansive how they are going to provide further accommodations for people with disabilities. Cultural activities, I still scored medium high on this, but they were just more explanation on what the timeline, the process for the album, and then what is the live showcase. That would have been just a little bit more helpful to understand the project as a whole. Overall, I scored this with a medium high score.
Thank you. Corinne, are you back by any chance? I know we've been having difficulty connecting. If not, Lexi, can you provide some commentary, please? If you have any differing thoughts.
Pretty aligned with what Sam has said so far. I did give a high score on the cultural activities. I think that sort of celebrating East Austin's Chicano and Latino music scene, and having this collaboration end up with the release of a new album. So I think there were some details in question 4 that led me to giving them a high score there. Let's see. Yeah, scored them pretty highly in key constituencies and history of service. I think within cultural leadership, it's clear that the artistic director has that sort of lived experience that represents key constituencies, but I would have liked to hear about the collaborators, who else is involved in decision making. So yeah, just more about other people who are involved. I think that is everything that I have to add to that.
All right, thank you. Are there additional comments from panelists on this application? Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. If there are no additional thoughts or comments, anything that you have that hasn't been stated by others? If there are none, if you would please finalize your scores and let me know when you have done so. John, Sam? And while we're waiting for Lexi to finalize her score, just clarification that the 10-minute timer has stopped. That was for reviewing the application. We asked panelists not to compare one application to another, so that's why they're finalizing their scores before we move on from this application and to the next. But the 10-minute time limit is only for the review of the application, not for finalizing the scores afterwards. And Lexi is good. Alrighty, thank you, everyone. Our next application up for review is PJ Raval. Sam and Lexi are our primary and secondary. And Sam, whenever you're ready to begin.
All right, this will be PJ Raval requesting $30,000 to develop a film to highlight and feature the cultures within the Asian American communities. Also including community events, screening of the film, and other community events to highlight the intersectionality between the Asian American North AA and HPI communities and other communities of color. Some of the positives I saw in this were that intersectionality is at the forefront. That is the main purpose of this, is to bring together these communities, directly connecting how this project will bring those groups together, and also highlighting the grant writers' lived experience within these communities and how that shapes their creation of the film. They scored in the high range for the majority of the areas. The two areas that I felt there was a larger need were accessibility and marketing. Accessibility, very little expansions on ADA supports. I did say I was curious how they would expand for people with vision disabilities, being able to give more descriptive explanations of what's happening on the screen. And then marketing, it seemed like the majority of the marketing plan relied on social media and the pop-up events. Those pop-up events being with an unspecific spot in town. So I'm curious how the marketing would work depending on where those events occur. How they are bringing in or focusing on people with disabilities, language acquisition, and then tourism as well. Though this could be a really good project to bring in people and bring people to screenings, utilizing more is needed to utilize beyond social media in order to bring those people in to see this film. And I scored this in a medium range.
Thank you. Before we move on to secondary, staff has not done has only done a cursory glance, but we are following along. I do see in their accessibility section, they do say, and maybe it's just because you wanted more detail, Sam, but it does say audio description and transcript will be available for the blind. And that's specifically for Kappa stories. So just pointing that out in there. With that being said, secondary, Lexi.
I largely have the same notes as Sam, with an overall medium high score. I gave them a medium score for accessibility. I think they had some expanded access, beyond the sort of ADA mandates, same notes on marketing as well. The only other thing I think is for language accessibility, I also gave a medium score there. The film will be translated into Spanish, which is great. I also wanted to just hear a little bit more about like how outreach and events would be accessible to non-English speakers. So details about that would have been really helpful, but in sort of all of the other categories, I think that equity and inclusion were pretty central to the proposal and scored highly in all of the other categories.
Great, thank you. Are there any additional comments related to this application? All right, thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Any final thoughts? Anything you have in your notes that hasn't been stated already by someone else? Differing take? Seeing as there are no further comments, if you would please finalize your scores and let me know when you have done so. Lexi, Sam, and John. And I can't remember if I've stated it for this application. I'm stating it for all the applications, just in case someone is watching only their own recording or viewing live and it's just here just for this one. But Clorin is here, or he was here. Something happened after break where his icon is still there, but he has not been able to rejoin us. So we will have a recording of this available. Panelists are not required to change their scores, but if they want to, based on the feedback from their fellow panelists, they can. And so we will make this available to Clorin so he can change his scores if he would like to. With that being said, we'll move on to our next application, which is Gottschall Music Productions. John and Sam are our primary and secondary. And John, whenever you are ready to begin. Oh, and you're muted, so the timer will start when you are giving your commentary unmuted.
Yeah, this is a request from Gottschall Music Productions. Let's see, for 30,000. It's to produce a music event. From what I can tell, it's for one evening at a venue. The idea is the reach, the demographics of the target demographics would be a variety of different people. I think mainly because it's marketed as music from different generations, from 50s, 60s, 70s up to current. What's that? Oh, I thought somebody said something. There was some things that I could have used some clarification on. Let me see. And like specifics for the advertising, I mean, it mentions a certain amount being spent on marketing, and it says social media, ad, flyers, but once being specific with what social media or where, how it would be distributed. Also, the website doesn't clarify what website. And the fees for performers can at $200, the city's requirement can add up really quick, but it doesn't say how many artists. But a breakdown of that would have helped me understand the event a little bit better. But other than that, pretty straightforward. That's all I got.
Thank you. Secondary, Sam?
So I struggled a little bit with the cultural activities for this one. And the key constituencies naming, where are my key constituencies? Naming African American, Hispanic, elderly, and young people as the 4 key constituencies. But this, the proposed activity of being the series of senior proms seems to only be affecting one of those, and predominantly focusing on the elderly as an opportunity for the performances. It talks about the representation of those key constituencies, but not necessarily the inclusion of. So the performance of music in the style of, but not involving them in the production. And then along with that, accessibility, where's my accessibility? Ensure that all entries and dance floors are wheelchair accessible. So just sticking with the ADA code. And then the budget, I did struggle with the budget a little bit because I was trying to figure out, similar to what John said, just trying to figure out how, why, how many, all of those different questions. And the specificity of accessibility, transportation, the transportation was a hard one, because it never mentioned the transportation within the actual grant itself. Overall, I did score this with a lower score.
All right, thank you. Are there additional comments on this application?
I would just say I had this sort of same thoughts as Sam around the cultural activities response. I did end up scoring it highly, but I think my thought process was that, like, while this specific activity, so the like senior proms they're proposing really just like broadly center senior communities, I think the like the artist mission and the music choices centering culturally significant music for Black and Hispanic communities, I sort of went back and forth, but I took that ultimately as being that those key constituencies were still central to their programming. So I did end up giving it a high score there, but it was a little bit of a sort of like taking in the whole application and thinking, I think that I am leaning more that way.
Thank you, Lexi. Any additional comments related to this application? All right, thank you.
Thanks, everyone. If there are no further comments, differing thoughts, concurring thoughts, but a note or a comment you have that hasn't been stated. Seeing as there are none, if you would please finalize your scores and let me know when you've done so. John, Sam, Lexi, and Corinne, thank you. And we are on to our last application up for review today, which is Voces Nuestras Historias. Voices are stories. John and Sam are our primary and secondary. And John, whenever you're ready to begin.
Are you done?
No. Okay, this is a request by Voces Nuestras Historias for $30,000 grant. And it seems to be laid out. I don't have any notes as far as anything that I didn't quite understand, especially that the budget is broken down into the budget covers everything that was mentioned in the proposal. So and that includes the key constituencies they're covered. The history of service is documented too. Cultural leadership, all these things were covered. I ended up being like mid to high across the board for everything. The intersectionality part of it is documented language. The only thing that I thought could have helped make it clear is the budget lists, the budget is itemized and it lists everything, but kind of like sub details of where I would have understood it better if it was broken down into further detail as far as where the different sections were going. Like, you know, as an example, social media. Well, which social media, you know, we're talking about, or, you know, things along those lines. But other than that, that's all I have.
Thank you. Secondary, Sam?
So the areas in which I just needed more clarification was the actual cultural activity itself. I understood the what was going to be created, but it was the how, when, and where. That was the areas of questioning, just to know a little bit more, because I think there's just not a description of how this is going to occur, other than the creation of the installation. And then same thing with ADA. It does reach ADA compliance, but nothing beyond. And then marketing was one that I struggled with, because there's the brief mentioning of, it's mostly focusing on social media, and then there's this brief mentioning of, and it's going to go to the hotels, and it's going to go to this website, but not much of what's the marketing strategy within that, or are we? I'm trying to figure out if we were listing things because that's a requirement, or if it was beyond that, to make sure that it does leave the area of just social media marketing. But beyond that, that was my only comments.
Thank you. Are there additional comments on this application? No. All right, thank you.
If there are no further comments on this application, divergent views, concurring views, but with a different note or thought that hasn't been stated. Again, we ask our panelists not to repeat anything that has already been stated, but just like to give them a second either to look through their notes, see if something does spark something in their head. But if there are no further comments on this application, if you would please finalize your scores and let me know when you have done so. John, Corinne, Lexi, and Sam. Alrighty, thank you everyone. That concludes our panel for the day, and we will stop the recording here.